Hey, thank you all for showing up. I appreciate it. My name is John Shieber. I am a writer and editor with TechCrunch. Before we get started, I just wanted to say one thing. I mean, it's amazing that we're all here meeting and discussing issues around diversity, but I was wondering if we could just acknowledge all of the people who are in the streets right now in Washington, D.C., here in Los Angeles, in Boston, in New York, who are walking around also working for diversity and rights. I think it's important to acknowledge all of that and put what we're talking about in here in that broader context of what's going on in the wide world. A kind of scary one right now, a little bit. But I am not a woman in VC, but I have an esteemed panel of women who are in VC to talk to us a little bit about their experiences and what it's been like. I wanted to kick things off just with a sort of table setting question. Why do y'all think diversity is important? I mean, we're talking about diversity as if it is something that's a foregone conclusion that it's important, and I believe that it is, but I'd like to get y'all's takes on why you would love to see more diverse companies, more diverse founders, and more women in boardrooms and executives at companies. So if y'all, Priya, if you want to start us off, and then we can just go down the road, take it.
I think diversity is so important because if you have the exact same type of person, whether it's regardless of race, gender, or even skill set, if you have the exact same type of person who can do the exact same type of programming, coding, and you have that person times 10, and that's the only person that you repeatedly invest in or support, then you really have no creativity and you're actually not fostering an ecosystem of growth, right? And so it's very important to really diversify in terms of race, gender, age, and in terms of skill set. Like if you have a founder who's very sales and marketing focused, you may want someone a little bit more technical to compensate. And so I think balance is key to everything.
Alyse, which?
I think that my answer might be a bit different or more direct post-election and in the context of what's going on today than it would have been 6 months ago. But 6 months ago, and it's still true today, I would say that from the seat of a venture capitalist whose job is to produce returns and support companies to grow and have impact in the world, that often the most cutting-edge innovation and the most impactful innovation comes from kind of outsider communities, and so diversity is important just to produce returns and change and innovation. But after this very surprising result to the election, I think that now we kind of see just for course of the world and for global sustainability and the sustainability of societies and nations even, that we need to have more women and diverse folks, non-white men, in positions of power, authority, and ability to allocate resources and make decisions. So I think that my reaction post-election was just that the mission that we have is more important than it would have been with a different result.
I completely agree with what both of my co-panelists said, but to bring it somewhere else, I mean, I think the American dream isn't the American dream without diversity, and being able to come from other countries and places and succeed, and many of us are entrepreneurs here, and we live the American dream every day. We're creating companies. I mean, it needs to be a diverse thing. I mean, you can also bring it to like the Myers-Briggs test. It's really important to have people who are literally different types. The Guilt founders realized they were all the same type on the Myers-Briggs test. There were 5 of them, and so then they started hiring based upon that. And then also for me, I'm really driven by, I mean, I think it starts from a place of women. For me, I'm very passionate about having more women on the covers of magazines running incredible companies so that young women know that they can do that as well. And so I think that's important to have diversity in all different, shapes and sizes and sexes.
We'll get to hiring in a minute. That's definitely something that I want to talk about. But before that, I mean, we talk about unicorn companies, but being a unicorn founder, being a founder of a women-led venture capital firm is sort of being a unicorn in its own right. I mean, they're so rare right now. It's like a mythical thing. And I'm wondering if y'all can walk me through, Alyse and Jesse, the process of fundraising as a woman trying to found a new venture capital firm, and you know, sort of the hurdles you found, whether you found allies along the way who were able to sort of smooth that road, and just what that road looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start. Fundraising, I think, is brutal any way you cut it, but I actually really have tried to change my whole mindset. Leah from TaskRabbit actually said to me, I love fundraising. And I was like, you do? Why? It's so brutal. She's like, I love it. I get to go out and talk to new people and, you know, new interesting people every day. And I really changed my mindset based on what she had said. And I think fundraising as a female, I've learned a lot about that as well. I was actually told that women wouldn't write checks for me. And I'm running a female-founded consumer tech fund, so that's like my focus. So I was like, oh, that's kind of sad that they won't write checks for me. But I actually now have 70% female investors, and so they do write checks. I think it's actually like a very untapped market is something I've learned. I also have had the most success with women who have had someone take a bet on them. And so actually younger sort of high net worth individuals, I would say, who sold a company. And I find it harder to crack the women, and I'm not only going after women, I have a lot of great male investors as well. But I find it harder to crack the corporate women who had to kind of like climb their way to the top, and it was a brutal journey, and they're not as supportive of the next sort of generations of women. So that's been kind of a different thing to see.
That's, if you, yeah, sorry.
So I'm taking a bit of a different approach. I started just at the beginning of 2016 to begin to build this investment practice, an investment advisory practice, which is called StillMark. But the approach I wanted to take was to present a model that I thought aligned better both for LP interest, well, for family office style LP interest and for founders. And what that is that I put together a fund for each deal I do. So the LP group is curated for the specific investment, and also oftentimes bring people into, or always bring people into the GP that are curated for the same purpose. Now, in this process, though, the fundraising it's similar, but it's a shorter push. So I think it can be less fatiguing. But the way that I've gotten around even the need to kind of think about whether people are seeing me as a woman versus, you know, as the man that they expect to invest in is that I have certain sectors that I'm known in, and folks know, and I've invested a lot of time writing and investing and working with companies, and so people will know that amongst the group of men and women that I'll probably, and actually Jesse and I share some of the same spaces in this way. If people are looking at a blockchain company, for instance, and they're thinking of investors that know the space, then I hope they would probably think of both of us, and so the LPs also know that, so it kind of quickens the cycle.
Priya, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experience in a corporate shop. It's a little bit different than fundraising for your own firm, but there are significant obstacles, I'd assume, at Microsoft Ventures. I mean, I was just doing a quick look, and leadership at Microsoft is 82% male and 65% white at the very top of the pyramid. In the tech space, hires in tech aren't much better. They're only 17.5% of the employees who are involved in developing technology at Microsoft are women. When you look at those statistics, do you look at that as an obstacle to overcome? Do you see that as something like it must get tiring, right? Like dealing with that shit. Anyway, continue.
You worded it so well.
Writer, you know.
To be honest, I look at that and I view it as, great, I'm up for this challenge. And I want to be part of the new wave that helps change that. And I do fundamentally believe this, and coming from a corporate VC firm or a financial VC firm, I think it's really important to see where the industry is headed. And if you look at it, you'll see right now that there's about 10% of partners in VC firms are women, and that's such a tragedy. That's ridiculous. But if you look at it, the non-partner investing team at most VC firms, that's actually 25% women. And so I view that as a really strong positive, because you have the entire future group of potential investors. Now all you have to do is retain them, which I think is key, and it's very important. And it's important to look at kind of female-led companies. And I came from Square before coming to Microsoft Ventures, and 50% of the executive team were women. And they were very strong, completely powerful women. And so that was definitely very encouraging.
Well, if you ever get the urge to go back to the operational side, I was talking to a woman who runs a venture capital firm earlier today who mentioned that she's looking for fintech entrepreneurs to invest in. So if you want to get back in that side of the shop, you might want to talk to Jesse after. I'm just saying, making connections left and right. One housekeeping note as well, I like to make these things as sort of interactive as possible. It's hard to do when I'm on stage and y'all are out there. But if you want to tweet questions at me, I will pose those questions to the panelists instead of having to wait till the end. Someone walking around with a mic just makes things easier. And my Twitter handle is around. It's just my first initial last name, Shieber, J.Shieber, on Twitter. And holler at me, and if it's a good question, I'll totally ask it. And if it's not, I'll just mock you. So I do it. I want to get back into the notion of sort of transparency in hiring and sort of how y'all look at that or think about that. Many companies in tech now, despite how woefully they are doing with diversity numbers, are posting them. Snapchat isn't. Someone might want to talk to Snapchat about that when they're here later today. Just saying, just throwing that out there. That's not going to be me, but someone should. But when sort of y'all look at entrepreneurs who are starting a business, how much do you privilege diversity in the team of hires? There's this notion that comes from VCs often that like, oh, we hire based on talent, right? Which I think is bullshit, frankly. I mean, like, there are lots of talented people in the world, and not everyone is going to look like a Stanford grad. So I'm wondering, where y'all put the emphasis when a company is getting off the ground around diversity. How transparent do you want to be, or do you want your portfolio companies to be with stuff like that? Sorry, that was a rant, but.
I mean, for me personally, I come from an interesting place because, I say I do invest in men, you just have to have a woman founder. So I've actually said, gotten pretty far along with some male founders and said, okay, great, well, when you have a female founder, come back to me. Which, you could look at that as sort of like a different type of sexism, but that's what motivates me, and I really want to help fix these numbers.
I think starting the conversation early with companies on building diverse teams is important, because once you get to a certain size of team, and if you're homogeneous within the first 20 hires, it's harder to bring on an incredibly talented Latin or Hispanic engineer after that, or woman engineer, or someone that falls outside of what the group looks like. I had an experience recently. My wife is a Latin engineer working in the fintech space and has been really successful with what she has built, and people reach out to me often to say, like, hey, can you introduce me? And it's like, there's just no way that she would want to go to a company of 20 male engineers, no matter how exciting it is, because it doesn't suggest the fact that you're inclusive or considerate in how you build your teams and create dialogue at the company. So to kind of prevent that in companies I work with, we talk about diversity and how to strategically build that as you grow your company from the first team of 5.
What about at Microsoft? Like, how important, is that something that y'all consider in your metrics when you look at investing in a company? Or?
We have a quite unique perspective on this. Our group was founded only last year, so we're a very new group, and we have 7 investors. Every single person's of a different race. We have a lot of women on our team. 3 of them are women, including myself. And so we feel that if you have diverse investors coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives, everyone's smart, but they have completely different backgrounds, different majors, different perspectives, then eventually you're going to identify companies with different perspectives as well. And that could be different race, folks of different genders, all sorts of different diverse candidates out there. But by having a diverse investing team, I think that opens the platform.
How involved are y'all in the setting up the process for hiring at these firms? Because I was speaking to, I think he's the head of HR at Slack now. I forget the fellow's name, but he's really awesome. He's amazing. He was at Twitter. He sort of burned Twitter down when he left for their lack of diversity. And one of the things that he talked about is like this double-blind hiring process where you anonymize everything, right? And you just look at candidates based on simply whether they're passing the test, doing the code well, how long it takes them, et cetera, et cetera. How important is that to the process versus, looking for pedigree? And I'll get back to pedigree in a second too. But just when you think about hiring, like, is that something you try to instill in the companies that you back? Alyse, if you wouldn't mind taking that one first. And then.
Sure. So I haven't used a process like that and working with companies to help them hire, but you referenced pedigree, and I think that's an important note to make, is that a really quick, simple, and kind of lazy scan of candidates is to review pedigree and the brands that they have on their resume, and so that's something that we do try to be very conscious of in the screening process and try to filter that out in the first pass. So having folks review and make sure that they review to bring a diverse group together, then they will pitch upwards in terms of decision-making process, and do so in a way that they can advocate for candidates without having to reference back to the brand, because they're trusted to select without using that as a crutch.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that one? Or?
I mean, I get in pretty early into the companies, so I'm involved in hiring in the beginning, and then once it's sort of beyond me, there. I actually had an interesting story, and this doesn't totally refer to pedigree, but recently I had a founder who I had almost committed to investing in. She made me interview her potential new head of sales, and I think we closed each other, which is a good tactic if you're trying to close an investor. I was like, wow, this girl's brilliant. She got me excited about her new head of sales. She got, but I think the more diverse the starting team is, the more they will, take diversity into account.
Along a similar vein, and this comes from the audience, and I want to make sure that I ask an audience question so y'all know that I'm actually paying attention to y'all. How do you overcome pattern matching bias in making investment decisions if you don't have a mandate to invest in diverse teams? How do you overcome pattern matching bias in making investment decisions?
So quickly, I review my pipeline about once a quarter, both pipeline and companies I'm working with or investing in about once a quarter, to see, to make sure that it represents the diversity that I want to see myself, and I find holes that way too. And so it's never been an issue. All of the teams that I work with on my own, so after in LA, I worked with 2 large funds prior to starting my own practice. And since I've left, I've only worked with teams where there's been diverse groups, but within that diversity, I check to make sure as well, just by looking at the numbers, that it's truly diverse and not just split between men and women, for instance.
Where are y'all finding the best, how are you sourcing your deal flow? When you look at deals, Priya, what are you doing to try and make sure that you're going out and finding the best women entrepreneurs or diverse set of entrepreneurs?
So there are a lot of different, I love that there are a lot of different female entrepreneur groups out there in Bay Area, and there's also a lot of minority groups out there, so I love being a part of all of them and staying plugged into that. And then also a lot of deal flow comes through co-investors, so fellow VCs. And so there's an entire community of VCs who are a little bit younger investors, who are also minorities and who are from different races. There's a group for them too, so I love staying plugged in with that. And that usually tends to be a good source of new candidates, new deals.
I find deals in a whole bunch of different ways. I go to demo days, I try to track companies before. I like to get into YC before demo day. And then
got some family connections that can help there, right? I mean, a little bit, come on.
A little bit. But I like to track companies for a little while. The female founder community has been really supportive of me, and they bring me a lot of great deals as well. I work with a lot of media companies. They bring me interesting deals. But then, you know, a lot of deals are brought to me, and every once in a while you get an idea for a company and then you go find it. So I have a couple of those as well. I'm really interested in this idea of like a privatized police force, and so I've been like seeking out all of those companies, and I just met with a really fascinating one in Seattle, and you know, with all this crazy stuff going on in the government, it's really kind of like sparked my interest a little bit. And then there's a few others like that that I'll go seek out, because you know, I'm looking for female founded deals, but I'm looking for the best deals too.
Do you have any thoughts on this?
So I just wanted to make point that in looking for the best deals, those just come from diverse founders. So that's why I think it's great to have a mandate. It probably also really helps with inbound deal flow. But I think just in simply looking for the best deals, if you're not prejudiced against certain groups of founders, you will have a diverse group of founders coming in.
And now, Jesse, you mentioned privatizing or private police forces, which I would love to talk to you about at some point offline. Wow. But like when y'all look at sort of what you're
Not all privatized, for the record. Not all privatized, but you know, the police force in California dropped by some crazy number. It was like 50% of police officers, you know, dropped out of the force. And so it just freaked me out about security and all of these things. And so what do you do, you know, like I was talking to this great company in Seattle, what do you do when, sorry, this is a total tangent, but what do you do when you have a Seattle Seahawks game and you don't have enough cops to cover it? You have to call 10 different organizations, and hopefully they have enough people. And so it's just, that was what...
We only have a few minutes left, and so I understand that, like, I'm fascinated by that thesis. I want to talk to you about it. But across the board, when y'all look at areas where you think there are opportunities for women entrepreneurs to come in, or entrepreneurs in general to come in, to serve a market, or markets that have traditionally been ignored, are there things that you look at that you see? I asked this sort of, Jesse and I were talking earlier about some of the companies in her portfolio, but like, I'm curious, Priya, what are you looking for these days? What excites you in the tech space in general, broadly, whether it's a woman entrepreneur or any entrepreneur, really?
Yeah, so I've been focused a lot on frontier technologies, and so artificial intelligence and machine learning continues to keep growing, and it's one of Microsoft's main mandate to democratize AI eventually, and not view AI in the way that it takes away jobs, or it's something scary to look at, but actually view it in a way that it's beneficial and can help us in our daily lives. Yeah. So that's definitely something. So usually I'm doing a market landscape or a thesis that I'm trying to develop in that space, and then looking for all sorts of different founders from different geographies.
And Alyse, I know you've been very interested in Bitcoin as well. Are there blockchain technologies, I should say?
The core technologies that I'm interested in are machine learning and intelligence and blockchain, and then the sectors that I like to look at are healthcare, fintech, and new forms of marketplace. And within the new forms of marketplace, I've recently spent a lot of time in the fashion and retail tech space.
And Jesse, what about you? We talked a little bit about this.
Yeah, I mean, I look for consumer tech, so that's products and services that you can sell in interesting ways. And so I obviously see a ton of fashion tech. I'm really excited about the healthcare space. That said, I see like pretty much all of the companies that relate to this part of the female area. And I'm like tapped out in tampon companies, but and then I'm excited about this kind of like gov tech, if I can figure out a way to find ones that have less red tape. I'd love to see more fintech, actually.
I agree with you on the women's health stuff. Like that's just it's ridiculous that it's a $40 billion marketplace that's totally underserved, right? Like there's no reason for that, right? There are tons of opportunities, great companies there. They're saying that I'm out of time. I don't really care. Do y'all have anything that you can tweet at me or you can just holler at them from right there. Like, do y'all have anything else that you'd like to ask these incredible women who are doing amazing shit?